So Edward Whymper was a Victorian British mountaineer. His lifelong obsession and ambition was to be the first man to climb that mountain, to be part of the first team to stand on that summit. And in 1865, he put a team of men together to do that. Himself, two Swiss guides, father and son, both by the name of Peter Tugwalder, two Englishmen, a Scotsman and a Frenchman, another French guide by the name of Croz. And on the 14th of July 1865, that team reached the summit. Whymper had achieved his dream of standing on the top of the Matterhorn. But, as so often happens in the mountains, on the descent, things didn't go as well. Croz was leading, then the two Englishmen and the Scotsman, then Whymper, and right at the back, the father and son team of Peter Tugwalder and Peter Tugwalder. They were tired, it had been a long day, they were probably suffering from the effects of altitude, and back in those days, their equipment, their clothing, their footwear probably wasn't as good as it is today. And at one point, one of the front four lost his footing, slipped, and knocked a second member of the front four off the mountain. And the front four members of the team lost their grip and started sliding down the side of the mountain. But luckily, the three at the back managed to hold the fall, Whymper and the two Tugwalders. But unfortunately, back in those days, it was an old Victorian hemp rope. The rope didn't hold, the rope broke, and the front four members of the party slid down the mountain to their deaths on the glacier below. So Whymper's dream of achieving success on the Matterhorn was tainted by the tragic deaths of four members of that party. So back in London, the press picked up on this story, and it became a scandal in Victorian Britain for not just one reason, but for two reasons. Firstly, the press and the public asked the question, why were these young men climbing in the first place? Why were they risking their lives? What's the point in climbing mountains? And I think it became a particularly high-profile case because one of the young men who died was due to inherit a very, very, very substantial fortune. And at one point it was felt that Queen Victoria herself might ban members of the British Empire from climbing mountains. Luckily that didn't happen. But I think we need challenge in our lives. Without challenge, there's no real success. Without challenge, there's no growth. And for me, challenge is an essential part of life. The story became a scandal back in Britain for a second reason. And the second reason is slightly more insidious. The press hinted at a different version of the story. The original version of the story was that the team reached the summit, began their descent, and at one point the front four slid off the mountain, lost their grip, but were arrested in their fall by the three at the back holding them with the rope. As I said, the rope broke and the front four fell to their tragic deaths on the glacier below. The press hinted at a different version of that story. The press hinted that maybe, just maybe, the front four fell, the three at the back managed to hold them with the rope, but couldn't save them and couldn't pull them back up the mountain. So the press suggested that one of the top three took out a knife and cut the rope. The truth of that story, the truth of that day, is lost in history. We'll never know what really happened. When the remaining three got back down the mountain, there was an inquiry, there was an investigation, but the results were inconclusive and no blame was ever apportioned. Whymper never really recovered his reputation from that episode on the Matterhorn. The taint of scandal chased him for the rest of his days. He spent a significant portion of the rest of his life touring England, touring the British Isles, talking about the Matterhorn and trying to persuade those that he met that he was innocent of blame. The real story, the real truth of what happened on that mountain that day is lost in history. Maybe, just maybe, the rope was cut, but maybe, just maybe, in cutting the rope, instead of having 4 men fall to their tragic deaths that day, if the rope hadn't been cut, all 7 members of that team would have fallen to their deaths. And sometimes in business we're faced with very difficult decisions. Sometimes when we make decisions, outsiders look on our decisions from a different perspective. History judges us in a different way. And one of the things I've come to realize when we're making decisions is we realize that outsiders are going to see us in a different way, and history is going to judge us from a different perspective. But when you make those difficult decisions, you need to have a very strong sense of personal values, of what's right and what's wrong. You need to gain advice and ask others for an opinion. And if and when you do make that decision, you need to look back and realize whatever happens in the future, whatever other people's opinions about your decision, you made the right decision for you and for your team at the time. So I've talked about a number of concepts in this video. Firstly, I've talked about taking on challenges in our business careers. For me, challenge is important. For me, without challenge, there's no real success, and without challenge, there's no real growth in life. So I think challenges are essential for all of us. I'm talking to a young man tomorrow morning who's currently working for somebody else, but now he wants to take on that challenge of becoming self-employed, and he wants to have a chat with me over a coffee. I've also talked about this concept of difficult decisions in business. It's something we're all going to encounter at some stage in our business careers. And I genuinely believe that when we do, we need somebody else to talk to about those decisions, and somebody else who can throw a different perspective on the choices that are available to us. I met a business person about 2 years ago, and he had recently made a decision about money that he knew with hindsight wasn't the right decision. He didn't have advice, he didn't have somebody who could talk to about the choices available to him. And he said to me, never again. The next time I make a decision like that in my business, I will make sure I have somebody to talk to. I will make sure I have somebody who can throw a different perspective on the choices available to me. If you want a conversation about taking on challenges in your life or in your business, or if you want a conversation about making difficult decisions in your business, give me a shout. The number's on screen. Give me a call. The email address is there as well. We'll meet, we'll have a chat, we'll have a coffee. That's me, Peter, Iridium Consulting, and thank you for listening.